Hello, Clarinet Channel, and welcome to episode number 17 of the podcast. In today's episode, I got to sit down with Emma Johnson, a famous clarinet soloist from the United Kingdom. And the piece you were just listening to was from her yet to be released album called The Tree of Life. And the snippet was specifically from the third movement called The Truth of Things. The Tree of Life has been an amazing project Emma has worked so hard on, and it is set to be released in January of 2027. So be sure to check that out when it is released. Emma and I talk a little bit about her inspiration behind it in today's episode, so stay tuned to learn more. And before we dive in, I'd like to share some exciting news as we are approaching about a month away from our 2-year anniversary. The Clarinet Channel has officially hit over 1,000 streams on Spotify and has reached over 60 countries. And all I could say is just thank you all so much for tuning in. I really hope you all have enjoyed. I've certainly enjoyed making these episodes and hopefully way more to come in the future. And so without further ado, let's dive into why we all are here. I hope you enjoy this interview with Emma Johnson. Welcome, clarinet enthusiasts, to episode number 17 of the Clarinet Channel. And sitting with me here today is someone who has done amazing things in the clarinet world, has won an extraordinary amount of awards, one from the Queen herself, and we have a pretty similar name. I am honored to welcome Emma Johnson to the podcast. Thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me. And how could I refuse when your name is almost the same as my name? So
I know, we're like twins. Yeah, this is another one of these episodes that has been a long time in the making. Have we been talking since what, February, March or so? Yeah,
Mm,
yeah. So
yeah,
I've just really been looking forward to this conversation, and I'm so excited we finally get to have you on today.
me too. Looking forward to it.
Yeah, there's just so much you can dive into here with your career. You've done so many amazing things, but why don't we start from the beginning? Where did your journey with clarinet begin, or did you have a defining moment where you felt like clarinet was the career you wanted to pursue?
I was very lucky in that my first school, my primary school, as we call it in the UK, offered instrumental lessons when I was 8 years old. And I can, to this day, remember being incredibly excited that I could start to play an instrument. And we chose the clarinet because it makes such a fantastic sound. I just was obsessed with it really from the beginning and loved it. I just, I think, almost always had it at the center of my life. And going on from then, I think I was lucky to be able to take part in symphonic wind band, which was local to my area, and then also to play in. We have a national youth orchestra in the UK, so means you get to hear the good players from all over the country, and that's really eye-opening. I think I always knew that I would love to be a musician. Then at the age of 17, I won a talent contest that we have here called the BBC Young Musician of the Year. That just sort of catapulted me into being a household name here. I was suddenly really famous and being invited to do concerts and recordings. So I suppose my dream had come true at that age already at 17.
Yeah, that is no easy feat to achieve. Do you like have a teacher or a school or something to thank for your success early on?
I was very lucky to have a great local teacher, John Brightwell, Um, and I think also my mum and dad were great because they're not musicians themselves, but I think especially my mum, she knew that to keep somebody practicing enough, you've got to keep them really interested. And so she was often finding me new bits of music, different styles of music to have a look at. So I did a lot of practice, but I didn't really notice it somehow. And I was always working towards maybe some concert or leading my local wind band. It was always working towards something. So it wasn't as if anybody had to lock me in a room and say, no, you've got to play these studies for 2 hours. It was always just this big sense that I loved music. And I still to this day think that's really important, is that basic real love of music. If you're going to be a musician, if you possibly could consider doing something else, it's probably best not to be a musician, I think.
And that's how you know you're really passionate about it too. It's just you did all the work, but it didn't even feel like work. You just loved doing it.
Yes, yes, yes. Which isn't to say, that you don't work hard. Of course you do, because you're passionate about it, and you want it to go well. Yeah.
Yeah, and you really went down the more of the soloist career and like recording career rather than kind of being more of an orchestral based musician. Was there a point in your career where you felt like, oh, I'd rather go down the soloist route rather than more orchestral, big ensemble playing?
From the beginning, I was being asked really to give solo concerts. And after I finished my college degree at Cambridge University, I also did the Young Concert Artists in New York. I don't know if you know that competition, and that again is for soloists. So I was really that's how I was known, and that's how I was getting work. At the time, actually, though, my teachers said, in the end, you will have to join an orchestra, because that's basically what a clarinet does. It plays in an orchestra. So that was perhaps one of the challenges early on, was to prove to everybody that no, the clarinet's a really viable solo instrument, and you can give a very entertaining recital, entertain people for a whole evening just with the clarinet and piano. And I think at that time, particularly, so we're talking late 80s, early 90s, people tended to think that a soloist would play a piano or a violin. They hadn't really heard of somebody having a career as a soloist on the clarinet. So sometimes you'd have promoters saying, well, we did have a clarinet once, but it was very boring, and we wouldn't really have that again. So there was that to push against. But I found that challenge very interesting, and managed to develop a very wide range of repertoire, so that I could go out there and compete with the pianists and the violinists and all the wonderful repertoire that they've got.
Oh, I love how you were just bold enough to just kind of be like, well, I want to explore this other realm of clarinet, even though it's not very popular at the moment. I'm gonna go for it and see what lies ahead. And I think that's serves you really well. And what you just kind of mentioned was kind of on the same realm of the next question I wanted to ask you, which is, did you ever face any sort of like boundaries or barriers in your career in trying to get to where you wanted to be, your artistic vision? Every single one of my guests is completely different, but I feel like this is the one question I always have to ask because I'm always so curious. Like, was there anything you had to overcome to get to the point where you are now?
Well, I suppose I talked about the struggle with preconceptions of the clarinet just being an orchestral instrument. And certainly I have had to prove to people that you can make a wide variety of colors on the clarinet, and it has all those different styles available to it, the jazz, the romantic music, and the classical music. I think perhaps another challenge that I had to face was, well, wow, I had this big start, but then what? How do you keep that going? And how, you go to somewhere and you give a good recital, but are they going to invite you back? Really, that's how you make a career, is if somebody wants to have you back again in a few years' time. So that just that challenge of keep thinking of new ideas, I suppose. And I think my skills as an arranger and composer have really helped with that. I've been able to form a chamber group. Sometimes we're as many as 10 of us, and we do evenings of Strauss and Brahms and Leha and so on. I also have a jazz trio. We do the sort of trad jazz from New Orleans. I'm very passionate about my most recent project, which is my own composition. It's called Tree of Life, and it's a clarinet concerto inspired by a need to say something about the climate crisis at the moment. We've just been making a recording of that, which is coming out in January.
Yeah, I like how you touched on that because I wanted to ask you about some of your compositions. I was pretty interested in it. I listened to Tree of Life recently, leading up to this podcast, and I loved it. It was super cool. I think you have such a talent for composition. I'd love to play it one day. Is there like a full recording out as of now, or I could only find one small snippet?
Yes, no, we did a sort of potted version for the internet to give people an idea, but I'm so glad you liked it, and I would love for other clarinetists to play it. It's coming out in January, the full recording, and it I think it's I don't want to beat people over the head with the message about how you've got to recycle your rubbish and you mustn't fly too much and all that sort of thing. I think I just wanted to share with people some of the background sort of feelings of angst and maybe anger that some of us feel about this crisis, and frustrating it is that people don't seem to be moving towards a solution. So I wrote a piece that begins creating a sort of paradise, a beautiful world that the clarinet discovers. And there's a dance and a duo with drum kit, which turns nasty basically, and the clarinet's jazzy wails become more sirens and alarms, a call for help. Then there's a song about called The Truth of Things, but it ends with a piece called Resolution, and I've tried to make that as sort of anthemic and hymn-like as possible, because there are some reasons to be optimistic. I think that humanity will rise to this challenge. I'd really love it if clarinetists wanted to play it. So I hope, when they hear it in full, that they could always approach me, for the score, so that they could, program it.
Yeah, I noticed that a lot of your clarinet playing and your compositions kind of revolve around an environmental theme. Like you have a real passion for the environment and nature. I even saw on your YouTube channel there was a little video of you playing outside, like over the rainbow, just like
Right.
outside with the birds chirping. Yeah.
Happened during COVID.
Oh,
when of course we couldn't give concerts in concert halls. So I went and I played in my garden. I'm lucky to live in a part of London where we still have some quite nice garden as well at the back of the house, and so I went out there and played with the birds, joining in. And you're right. I mean, I'm really passionate. I've always loved nature, and it is a big reason why I write music. Also on this disc coming out in January is a piece inspired by a waterfall called Waterfall of the Gods that I saw when I was in Iceland a couple of years ago. And I just had to write a piece of music about it. And there just is something about the natural world and also the world of folk music, that sort of music that is indigenous to a place, or it seems to have its roots in people going years and centuries back. I just get very inspired by that, and it's I love that I've reached a point now where write my own music and do things that I'm passionate about. So use the clarinet, to advocate for what I believe in.
yeah. Do you feel like with your compositions and your performances, you're trying to promote an like a sense of warning or a sense of optimism for the future?
I think a sense of optimism, really. I think that is important. People, I think, turn to the arts for that reassurance, and I have a feeling when I go around giving concerts that it's a way of bringing society together. Groups from a locality will come to a concert and maybe meet people and make friends. It's still a very important activity that I don't think will be replaced by artificial intelligence. I think it's a very important thing that we do, and that music can have sort of healing and reassuring qualities. So um, I've written a piece for clarinet solo and tapping foot, and you have to tap your foot in rhythm while you're playing. But the feedback on that one has been that people find it rather hard to do. Um, I think it's a bit like tapping your head and rubbing your tummy at the same time. But I think maybe it would be nice if lots of clarinetists had a go at it, and it it always makes the audience smile anyway.
Wow, that's quite surprising to me that the composition where you're supposed to tap your foot is tough for people to do. Because I don't know if it's the case over there in UK, but over here where I grew up, it was pretty common that students would tap their foot to play, to learn how to play, just to kind of get used to counting and having a sense of tempo when playing.
Yeah, really. That's interesting, isn't it? And I think that would be more common, particularly in jazz, wouldn't it? I think definitely here that gets knocked out of you, that
Mhm.
wanting to tap your foot, when you're quite young in classical training anyway. Um, and that another one of my big causes here, and I don't know that it really applies in the US, is falling out of the curriculum in our primary schools here. So a lot of children are not getting the chance that I was given to hear orchestral instruments and to have lessons. So another thing I have done is write a series of what I've called instrument stories, and these are quite fun little stories that we do to 6 to 9 year olds, and they have music illustrating them so that they can hear the instruments up close. And many of them would not get to hear that now. I'm not sure if that's the case in the US, but certainly here that is in many of the state schools that is beginning to be a problem.
Yeah, you mean like the curriculum for music is kind of
There
falling
is no
out? Yeah.
Yeah, there is no curriculum for music. It's not regarded as important
Mhm.
here,
Mhm.
which is a very sad state of affairs, actually. And something another thing that I'm sort of pushing against with my clarinet and with my compositions as much as I can, so that I s- I think the arts perhaps are regarded sometimes as not as important as science subjects, whereas in fact, of course, they're extremely important. You know, you're not necessarily always going to find a job in the arts, but art expression is something that you take with you through your life, and that can make you feel more whole as a person, and help you in difficult times, and as well as helping you to make friends.
Mhm.
uh, or say if you move to a new area, playing the clarinet can be a very good way of meeting other people.
Mhm. For sure. It's
Yeah.
interesting that you brought up this little topic because I mentioned to you like a few days ago, I was in Pittsburgh for an event. I attended a graduation, and this was for a school that was very science and technology based. And so I went to their main graduation, and the keynote speaker was an amazing scientist, AI reformist, and most of the graduates were engineering and computer scientists, and that was the bulk of what they did. And then I went to their School of Music graduation. And one of the main things that their president said at graduation was, don't ever fall into the belief that our our career is just something that goes on in the background while more important things are happening. And I thought that was really interesting that she made sure to say that at this school that I went to. It was like, don't start believing that what you're doing is not important because it very much is.
Yes, it is, and we're beginning more and more to realize just what the power of music is. It can be beyond words, and actually really help people with mental health difficulties, and you know, people who've been excluded by society. It somehow can sometimes um, really affect them on a deep level, and really can help people, and that certainly should not be ignored. It's such an important language.
Yeah. Just a little side note here because I'm so curious. Is you are a kid, a child in UK, do you have the option to do band or chorus? It's just not like required or anything like that?
Not required, no, no.
But they have
So
the option?
no,
Oh no.
not it's not a requirement. No, that's the terrible thing. So it does happen at some schools because you have teachers with vision who understand how important it is and bring it into the school. But if that teacher is not at a school, those children will not have any music or art. It's not seen as an important part of the academic curriculum. So I think things need to change. And yes, thinking of the arts as secondary to the science subjects, it's just very backward thinking. Mm.
Yeah. I was gonna ask you about the instrument stories and some of the work you've done with children because it really piqued my curiosity as to, your passion behind that, your purpose behind that. So I love to hear that you're trying to bring music back to the UK. That's awesome. When I first joined band when I was little and I was going into band. We just had a day where they played a video for us in school, and it was called Be Part of the Band. And it had like a cute little theme song, and it went through every single one of the instruments, which I thought was really cool. They gave like a little introduction, but over here, it's not. Um, you can join band or chorus. Most schools have them, but it's
Mm.
not required. It's not necessary of the other classes.
But maybe it should be a requirement
Mm.
everywhere because
Ah,
they know that it increases people's intelligence and their ability at other subjects as well. So it's not just easy, soft option, is it? I mean, I
mhm.
think they know that when Einstein, the great physicist, when he died, they cut up his brain and they were surprised because there was a lot of this weird white matter in there. Now scientists know that that's this stuff called myelin, which your brain uses to hardwire new pathways, and you chiefly do that when you're learning a musical instrument and you're doing these very difficult feats with your fingers and so on. And so Einstein, of course, was a very good violinist, and he had all these hardwired sort of extra pathways in his brain. So I like to tell children that, that it's doing them a lot of good when they learn an instrument.
Hmm. I didn't know Einstein played the violin. That's really interesting.
Mm.
There's a video, there's a video I've seen a few times that's circulated around and people really enjoy it. It's a band director right before one of their concerts came up on stage and presented his students and was talking to the parents. It was a young band, maybe like high school level band, and he was talking about how at John Hopkins University, which has a really good med school right outside of Washington, D.C., they when they interview all the candidates who want to be a part of the med school, they always ask, one of the most important questions they ask was, did you do band or chorus or drama, any sort of art form throughout your education? And most of the times they'll choose the people who said yes or the people who said no, because it that art form allows you to not only worry about the science aspects of the medical field, but also the social, the personal aspects. They over there regard it as something as being so important, which I just love to see.
Wow. That's fantastic and so clear thinking. That's really great. I don't actually have a regular teaching job because I'm such a busy performer, but I do have a summer school where people come from all over the world actually in the summer and join me in London. And I'm always trying to persuade them, to be as broadly educated as possible because it makes you a more interesting clarinetist as well. We quite often as well talk about drama, and one of the questions that students quite often seem to ask me is about nerves and performing. And I often point them towards the Stanislavski method of acting, because there's a lot to learn from that. In that, that method acting where you get so involved in your material and it's so at one with it, you just know it so intimately that you can really feel at ease with it when you're on stage, and maybe do it in slightly different ways, but not freeze or feel stiff or anything. It sort of becomes part of you, and I do think musicians also can learn from looking at other arts and other ways of other performance, dance and drama, of
Mhm.
course.
Yeah, it's always so. Um, it's always necessary to like hear back from other clarinetists as to um what you need to improve on, what sounded great, what were their thoughts. But it's also always so interesting to me to hear from other instruments as to what they thought of my sound. And usually it's completely different feedback than what clarinetists would tell you,
Mm.
simply because they're coming from a whole different perspective. And I feel like that's so beneficial.
Oh, definitely. I mean, certainly, I think many of the musicians who've influenced me, they wouldn't really be clarinetists, actually. For example, one of the most exciting recitals I heard recently was the Chinese pianist Yu Jiawang, and she was just so in control of her material that the music was singing through her. And she also had video and pictures um, projected onto the stage behind her, which I thought was really cool. And I use that in that idea in my clarinet concerto as well when I play it live. And so I know what you mean. You know, you don't always just want to hear from a clarinetist about feedback. It's good, and it's good to listen to all sorts of other musicians. I mean, I I love Keith Jarrett, for example, the jazz pianist playing with Jan Garbarek, and I always go back to Ella Fitzgerald all the time, and her Cole Porter's songbook, because I just love all the colours that she can make in her sound. And I love to try and do that with the that's important to, particularly to get back to that feeling of that you're singing to people, and it's that natural basic expression of singing and communicating with an audience.
So you are someone who you've done a lot of recording as well as live performance playing, and I'm sure you've heard many live performances and listened to many recordings. When you are recording versus performing live, do you view recording as an exact mimicry of a concert hall performance, or do you view recording as separate, like as a separate art?
Well, that's an interesting question. I try as far as I can to get a feeling of it being live when I'm recording. I think the temptation can be to do everything in lots of little perfect chunks that you then can stick together, and it can sound very plausible. But I always think you lose that sense of expression, that sense of the shape of the piece and of the phrase. I'm sure that you lose the listener's ear when you record in that way. So when I go to a recording studio, I'm as prepared as I would be if I was just going to do a live concert. And I try as much as I can to imagine the microphone is a person listening to me, and that I'm going to give my best performance. I mean, the trouble with recording is that it's got so perfect, that the sort of the sound quality, that it can lead people down rabbit holes, and that they try and get every single note absolutely perfectly in tune, maybe, and then lose the sense of the whole piece. That is a trap that you can fall into if you're not careful. So you just need to be so well prepared for a recording. Ideally, to have played the thing that you're recording in concert a lot of times,
Mhm.
so that it's just ready to go.
Have you ever dealt with that feeling of, oh, well, I need to do one more take, one more take. That one wasn't quite perfect. There was a little mistake here. Like, where do you find that line where it's just like,
Yeah.
this is good to go. I'll ship it.
No, no, you're right. Yes, it's you can really waste a lot of energy just going out after some sort of perfection that may even exist. And then very often when you listen to the playbacks, actually your well, especially with me, I find my first thoughts were often the most inspired and the best, really. I I often find I'm in this situation where perhaps I'm recording with an orchestra and they don't know the piece as well. So you then, of course, you do have to do multiple takes while they really get the music into their bones. But I think, yeah, you have to be aware of that and try and think, like those old recordings. I really love really old recordings where they only had one go usually, and old jazz recordings, and you can really sense there's a person there playing to you, and I just love that. I think that's what music is all about. Um, so of course, people are going to listen over and over again. So you don't want any really noticeable bad mistakes or, something very out of tune in there. But at the same time, the most important thing is what does this music mean? What's it trying to say to the listener? What's it expressing? Have I got that? If you've got that, then you've got the essence of the music there.
So you've been playing and doing this career for a good bit of time now. Do you feel like throughout your career, your journey, that do you feel like your artistic vision or mission has changed at all throughout all that time?
I think I feel freer now. Partly, I mean, it's rather a mundane sort of explanation, but when when I started out, I really needed to earn a living and pay my mortgage and all that. So I had to be very influenced by what agents needed and what a recording company wanted me to do. Whereas, now those pressures are less, and so I feel that I am a bit freer now, and I can, write my own music and take up these causes that I believe in. And I just think also it's wonderful now that there are many more female composers and female conductors. I do quite a bit of conducting now. When I was in my 30s, I also did some conducting, but I found there was quite a bit of prejudice. There weren't many women composers or conductors around at that point, and I think it's a much healthier place out there now with all people being given a chance. And I also think that the type of music that you can write um, has really expanded. So you can write as I do using melody, whereas sort of 30 years ago that would have been thought as not at all what was required. They only wanted something that was much more avant-garde sounding. So a lot of different sort of colors and approaches are now permitted. So I do think it's a great time for being a composer.
Well, I gotta say, I feel like you are living the clarinet dream right now. I mean, you found your passion and you're just going for it. You're just being bold and it's working out for you. And now here you are, just at the top of your career, and you've paved the way for a lot of us, for a lot of us younger musicians, and just
Great.
kind of sculpted a
I
new
do
musical landscape.
more soloists now. I
Yeah.
think the clarinet is seen as a very expressive and interesting and fun instrument to play.
Mhm.
I think so. I'm really pleased about that. It's
Yeah.
fantastic.
When I
Yeah.
first picked up the clarinet, Um, it was the one instrument at like tryout day that I could make a really good sound on. So it was just like, there you go, you're gonna play the clarinet. And now looking back, I feel so thankful that this is the instrument that I learned and that I've chosen and that I play because it, it is so versatile. It can do so many things in the classical, modern, contemporary jazz spaces. It's so versatile. There's so much you can do. And I feel grateful all the time that this is the instrument that I play.
Yes, yes, it really is versatile. I mean, I think you still might get some promoters saying, "Oh, well, there isn't really any really famous recital repertoire apart from maybe the Brahms sonatas." That if you're thinking in an old-fashioned sort of way, you know, uh, but that's changed actually, hasn't it? I think now people just I've found that people just book me and they're interested to know what I'd like to play. You know, they don't say we want you and you've got to play a Brahms sonata. It's more likely that now they will say, yeah, come and play the clarinet and we'd be interested to hear what you do. So, you know, I can play something very contemporary as and some Mozart and some arrangement maybe of say, you know, Dvorak's sonatina, you know, all sorts of things are permitted. So it's that's really good, I think. Yeah.
Love it. I'll get you out of here on this last question. Very important question
Yeah.
everybody wants to know.
Yes.
What
Yeah.
is your what is your advice for young clarinetists who want to go after a solo career? What's your best piece of advice you'd give them?
Well, this is going to this will sound a bit practical, but I would say don't underestimate how many reads you should get going a, before a concert. You may think, you know, you've got two that you quite like, but you know they're bound to let you down, and you know just traveling there maybe on the train and it's really hot or something and you get there and they're just they're just not going to work very well anymore. So just don't underestimate that and have tons of reads ready. Actually, this was brought home to me last week. I did the Artie Shaw concerto. I don't know if you've ever played that, but there's a top C at the end, and I for some reason I programmed it right at the end of the first half, so I'd already been playing for about 40 minutes, and I before that final cadenza, I put on a new reed which I knew would be able to get that the top C, and I thought, thank goodness I've got, you know, I've got so many reeds that I made sure were up to scratch so that I can, you know, I can just do everything how I want and not feel limited or slightly nervous because I don't know if the reed is going to squeak or not speak properly. And I had a range of reeds, some a bit softer, some a bit harder. So some are good for getting some of the repertoire, other ones are better for the lyrical things I was playing. And so I would just I would just say really prepare lots of good reads so that in any scenario you can play your best. You never know who's listening, and you should just always be aiming to play at your very best level.
That's really good advice. My old my last clarinet teacher, he would always tell us that you guys need to stop thinking about reeds in terms of, you know, individual reeds, but in terms of boxes. So like when you're doing reeds, think about it in terms of how many boxes am I opening, not how many individual reeds am I doing, because it's so hard to find that perfect one.
Oh, it's really hard and it doesn't get any easier. I think it gets harder actually. And unfortunately it's expensive. I admit that. And that's a shame. But it it can be more important than an hour's practice, just making sure you feel secure with the read. It gives you mental security as well.
Mhm. Well, I gotta say, I love days like these when I do these interviews because I always leave them so inspired. It was so great to get to talk to you today. Before you go, do you have like where can we find you? Website, album
Yes,
releases, Instagrams, things like that?
exactly. Yes, I have a website, emmajohnson.co.uk, and I have a YouTube channel and Facebook and Instagram and so on. So, and most of my recordings, I think, are on Spotify. So, a variety of ways. And it's been a great pleasure to talk to you today.
Perfect. Yeah, I'll be sure to link everything down below in the description so that people can check it out. And of course, you're always welcome back if you once your Tree of Life album or anything else releases, if you want to come on and tell us more of the behind the scenes behind that stuff, please just let me know and I'd be happy to have you back on at any time.
Thank you. I'd be delighted. Thanks.
Yeah. Well, it was a pleasure.